People who allow the spirit to manifest itself occasionally in their lives achieve amazing success. People who allow the spirit to coexist equally with the mundane consciousness become geniuses. People whose spirit dominates the mundane consciousness are what we call saints. The wise say that man is a magical creature. This is a fact that does not require any proof for the wise. But why then can so few people realize their magical potential with which everyone is born and become happy? Because there is something that prevents a person from living the life that is his true purpose. This something is called by magicians the predator or mundane consciousness. How to defeat the predator and free yourself from its influence. We will tell you about it now. One of the first to openly tell a wide audience about predators was Carlos Castaneda. Being not only a mystical writer, but also a magician and warrior of the spirit, Carlos Castaneda wrote in his books about some aggressive and evil creatures that feed on human energy and devour their luminous shell. The fact is that magicians, according to Carlos Castaneda, perceive current energy flows in the world directly and see a person at the energy level as a luminous cocoon. The luminosity of the cocoon or human shell indicates that the individual is able to perceive events occurring in the world, analyze and respond to them in the necessary way. By devouring a person's luminous shell, predators deprive him of the ability to adequately perceive reality and interact with the outside world in a reasonable and effective way. Thus, a person deprived of the ability to reasonably relate to his life becomes food for predators and is their prey and energy supplier. Where did predators come from and why do they feed on human energy? Castaneda only gives hints to such questions in his books. He writes that sorcerers have long noticed predators and perceive them as part of our universe, to which sorcerers also attribute predatory properties. Predators are a given in our world like the sunrise or the blue sky. Sorcerers say that man, thanks to his ability to recognize and perceive energy flows in the form of tangible objects in the world, has a specific glow that is inherent only to man in nature and which attracts predators and is for them something like a pleasant delicacy or a favorite dessert. Castaneda himself perceived predators as shadows flickering in the darkness at great speed and filling all the dark space. Thanks to the magical gift that Castaneda had developed thanks to his teacher Don Juan, Carlos was able to see predators, and every time he interacted with predators, he experienced acute physical discomfort, panic, and severe dizziness. This condition was intensified by the awareness of the magical and terrifying fact revealed to Castaneda by Don Juan. According to Carlos's teacher, predators turned man into an obedient slave and battery in order to freely access his luminosity and feed on it. To do this, predators performed a terrifying maneuver on man, forcing the latter to think like a predator, act like a predator, and see the world like a predator. In other words, predators implanted their minds in man. In this way, they stole the life of every human on earth, making everyone a source of food and a generator of the luminosity that they devour. Man has long lived the life of a predator, being its food, and has long ceased to belong to himself. But what if we tell you that Carlos Castaneda, looking at the shadows darting about at great speed, saw not something external but the structure of his consciousness, which is characteristic of any ordinary person? And what if we reveal a secret to you, saying that the predator lives not outside but inside a person? To understand what is being said, it is necessary to take a few small steps away from the narrative and consider the structure of man as sorcerers see it. Try to concentrate on your ability to perceive the world abstractly and, with the help of controlled imagination, to imagine and admit into your consciousness what we will tell you about further. Magicians know that each person is not just a body, but a triple structure consisting of spirit, soul, and body. In other words, magic teaches that each person is not a conglomerate of chemical elements collected according to an unknown law into a physical body and subject to biological rhythms, but an immortal essence that has incarnated into this body. The immortal essence is the spirit, which, according to magicians, lives in eternity. Combining intellect and feelings, the human soul in the magical understanding is a conductor that absorbs the experience of awareness during physical life. In other words, the body is a material and mysterious instrument in the hands of the immortal spirit, which, with the help of the soul, collects the experience lived by a person in the material world during physical incarnation on earth. In this case, magicians say that the soul and body are in the power of a predator, which they call mundane consciousness. According to the magical vision, true consciousness or spirit and mundane consciousness are in constant confrontation. Having mastered consciousness and captured the soul and body, the predator replaces the guidance of the spirit in man, and thereby drowns out the voice of eternity and the divine immortal source, which is essentially man. In the power of mundane consciousness, due to impulsiveness and a superficial worldview, no one is able to reveal their magical potential, thereby living a life that is beneficial to the predator and which makes man convenient food for it. This means that, being in mundane consciousness, a person loses such a quality as thoughtfulness, which is capable of leading him to the awareness of his inner nature. Without the depth of awareness of himself as a part of the world, an individual spends his limited supply of energy recklessly, and this supply becomes insufficient to discover his destiny. In this case, magicians say that the predator has eaten the luminosity of the human cocoon. One of the fundamental laws of magic states that only in true consciousness, under the guidance of the spirit, can a person regain control over his soul and body. Living in harmony with himself and the world through the influence of the spirit on life, the individual finds the meaning of life and reveals the magical potential within himself. Of course, when working with new ideas, it is necessary to interact with those for whom such ideas have become part of their lives, but such people may not be around. By the way, for this purpose we created the Three Suns Closed Club, in which, together with the participants, we touch upon the unknown sides of both the spiritual nature of man and the unsolved mysteries of the world and the cosmos. It is the Three Suns Closed Club that helps to find like-minded people and begin to perceive the world better, clearer, and deeper. In the Closed Club, we publish all necessary information, links to films, books, scientific articles, etc. that will help you to get personal enlightenment. In case you want to join us in the Three Suns Closed Club and learn to perceive new ideas and begin to develop magical thinking that will enrich your life, we will leave a link in the description of the video. But how to confront the predator? Is there a tool with which each person can defend himself against the aggressive attacks of the energy-destroying mundane consciousness? Yes, without a doubt. Such a tool is discipline. Don Juan did not define discipline as the ability to wake up at 5 in the morning and douse himself with cold water until exhaustion. For sorcerers, discipline is the ability to steadfastly endure adverse circumstances that are not part of one's calculations. What does it mean? In its most common sense, the word discipline comes from the Latin word discipulos, which means one who is taught. This fact suggests that discipline is not a physical, intellectual quality of a person, which is determined by the conviction to repeat the same programmed actions over a given period of time. Discipline is the ability to constantly comprehend the world through training from the intellectual and sensory sides, striving for harmony with nature through a clear awareness of a deep unity with it. The unimaginable palette of the diversity of nature's mysteries, cognized by a person on the intellectual and sensory levels, is capable of preventing the consciousness from becoming fixed on the aggressive principles of a predator and protecting a person from its provocations. Thus, any individual is able to regain control over his own life. But from whom should one learn? Mystical philosophy teaches that the only teacher in a person's life is his spirit, the immortal and intangible essence which gains experience during successive incarnations on earth. By building the subtlest connection with his spirit and learning from it to see the world through the eyes of eternity, a person gently and gradually transfers control of his life from the mundane consciousness to the true one. In this way, any individual fences off and protects himself from the principles of the predator, manifested in his consciousness and in the consciousness of the people around him, and reveals his own predestination, receiving in his palms a gift from eternity, which is called destiny. Therefore, we can safely say that discipline is the ability to hear your own spirit and overcome earthly concerns, looking at them from the scale of the universe. Discipline allows the spirit to restore the luminosity of the human shell and move away from the mundane consciousness, learning the world in all its diversity and depth. This is what Don Juan meant when he said that discipline makes a person's energy shell inedible to predators. Friends, there is a separate material on our channel in which we tell you how to reveal such a magnificent quality as discipline in yourself. Study the practice of revealing discipline proposed by the research team of our project and reveal the consciousness of your immortal spirit in yourself. We will leave a link to the corresponding video in the description. Discipline reveals such a quality in a person as responsibility. The word responsibility comes from the word response. To be responsible means to respond to your spirit on its subtlest impulses and to build your life according to your purpose. Accepting responsibility for your life is one of the key conditions for getting rid of personal history. Since a person is in the power of mundane consciousness from birth, almost all of his personal history is not a consequence of a deep and harmonious attitude to the world, but the history of a predator who lived in a human body. It was this fact that scared Castaneda to the depths of his soul after Don Juan told him about predators. To consolidate personal history means to obey the command of predator, which limits the perception of the inner abyss and infinity that resides in the human heart. Thus, mundane consciousness does not allow a person to perceive the spirit and remember his divine origin. By anchoring personal history with stories about oneself, the life of an individual is built around his lower self, which becomes its active center. At the same time, the owner of a personal history spends enormous energy potential to create an image of himself in the eyes of others and the image of others in his own eyes. The center of life must be the spirit, which is capable of filling life itself with purpose and meaning, freedom and ease. This is how a person reveals his purpose and escapes the power of the predator. Each individual is an embodied force of the universe in a physical body with infinite potential. The principle of the predator limits perception to the size of personal history and surrounding circumstances. Thus, a person does not reveal his inner magical potential and gets lost among everyday things and events. This is the true influence of personal history. It forces you to be a bearer of ideas and patterns about yourself and your nature, spending enormous energy resources on this, which in essence should be spent by you on revealing a subtle and intangible connection with the spirit. A reckless attitude towards life and energy is destructive and exhausts a person. Magicians say that in this case the radiance and luminosity of the human cocoon are eaten by predators. The more openly and violently an individual expresses complaints and grievances, both to his own person and to the world in general, into which he was lucky enough to be born, the stronger the personal history becomes fixed. Instead of correcting the situation and changing his life for the better, a person is exhausted by constant discontent, essentially doing nothing and not changing the situation in any way. This process is called indulgence in the books of Carlos Castaneda. To indulge means to waste energy, to fix one's personal history through complaints and to feed the predator, giving it control of one's own life. Unfulfilled hopes, complaints, and a false perception of the world create a source of pain in a person, in which the predator hides. Fear prevents a person from seeing this source of pain. It is through pain and fear that the predator builds and implements its most insidious manipulations, forcing everyone to feel sorry for themselves and tyrannize those around them. Pain is the home of the predator. Personal history feeds pain. Pain feeds the predator. Therefore, the predator is interested in spreading personal history, because in essence, personal history is the border of predator's tyranny. These borders need to be reduced because maintaining personal history reduces the energy potential. Infinity inside a person needs energy and space to incarnate in the outside world and return to oneself the knowledge of one's own magical nature, to award oneself a fate worthy of the gods themselves. But the trouble is that this is far from all that the mundane consciousness does to a person. Over time, any predator becomes a scavenger. A scavenger is an extreme manifestation of the base desires of the mundane consciousness, which makes a person expect indulgences, beg, and constantly complain. A scavenger clings indiscriminately to everything that comes his way and eats scraps from the table of other predators, constantly waiting for a handout. A scavenger does not interact with the spirit and is constantly waiting for someone to weaken enough to take everything from him. A scavenger experiences fear and trembling before other predators, dreaming of their power, strength, and aggression, of their fate and place in the sun. A scavenger is a person who tyrannizes himself and everyone around him, whose noble creative principle is paralyzed by pain and fear, hiding behind constant complaints, grievances, and claims. The purpose of any person is to go to their spirit and create for the benefit of all mankind. The fate of any predator is the path to the life of a scavenger, living in constant fear, submission, and servility, and tyrannizing those who turned out to be weaker than themselves. To escape the influence of a predator, you need to reject the pain. See that this is the pain of a predator and not personal pain. The spirit of a person will never force you to experience torment. The spirit will give clarity and strength for creation and an understanding of how to realize one's own magical potential. The scavenger and the predator live in pain and constant fear, while the magician abides in the spirit and lives in infinity, where there are no grievances or claims. Evil dies in eternity. For the human spirit, eternity is the reason for its development, flowering, and fragrance. You may ask, since man is so powerful, why doesn't he just get rid of the predator and destroy him? To avoid this, the predator used the greatest and most devastating trick on man. Mundane consciousness deprives one of awareness. In order to manifest itself in life, the spirit requires complete awareness from man. Through awareness, the spirit gently, tactfully, and carefully changes man's life, building it in accordance with the laws and harmony of the universe. Conscious interaction with the spirit is called intention in magic. With the help of intention, everyone is able to change their life in accordance with their destiny. Since true consciousness directs man to unity with everything in the universe, and unlike the parochialism and short-sightedness of mundane consciousness, perceives everyone as part of the great unity, the right intention always concerns not only the man himself but all people. To awaken the spirit within oneself, it is necessary to help people get rid of the dictatorship and oppression of mundane consciousness. To succeed in defeating the predator and its principles, we present you with a practice for getting out from under the influence of the predator. With this practice, you will be able to regain control over your own life and boldly move towards your own destiny. Stop maintaining a personal history. This does not mean getting rid of a personal history entirely. This is not required of an ordinary person whose life is closely intertwined with social obligations. To stop maintaining a personal history, you need to, firstly, stop talking about the past. This will stop the expansion of the boundaries and the increase in the volume of your personal history. Also, if you stop telling others about your past and remembering the past, you will feel how the energy you spent on fixing it in your personal history is freed up for the magic of the present and the greatness of the future. Secondly, stop complaining and taking offense. Complaining and taking offense are a powerful tool for fixing a personal history. Through complaints, you focus on what you are unhappy with and not on ways to overcome your dissatisfaction and change the conditions in which you find yourself. You can feel offended, but do not allow yourself to be offended. If a yard dog barks at you, you can feel offended, but it will be pointless to be offended at it. Freedom from complaints and grievances will return the energy you spent on fixing your personal history and will allow you to concentrate on developing your best qualities in order to get to know yourself from new sides. Thirdly, when meeting people, listen more than talk. Since a person is used to talking about himself, excessive talkativeness gives rise to inattention to everything that does not concern his own personal history. It is necessary to listen attentively to what others say. Try to recognize and hear in people the voice of infinity and the call of their spirit through stories. This maneuver will open you to the vision of how personal history significantly narrows people's perception of reality. Observing this process in others, you will recognize it in yourself and will be able to reduce the negative impact of fixing your personal history on your development as a spiritual being. Look into the pain that hides behind your personal history. See how this pain controls you. In fact, through pain, a predator controls you using fear for this. In order to neutralize the influence of mundane consciousness, do not appropriate pain and recognize in it something alien to your spirit. The pain is not yours, but the predator inside you. Therefore, stop being afraid to look into the pain inside you. Realize that in every person, the predator lives precisely in the internal pain. Try to feel that there is no personal pain. There is the pain of a predator, implanted in people through their personal histories. The true tragedy is that a person chooses the mundane consciousness in himself and does not use the true consciousness of the spirit. This is the root of human suffering and the reason for his fears. Strive to help everyone get rid of pain. In this way, you will overcome the influence and dictate of mundane consciousness and get rid of constant painful internal experiences. Ask the Spirit for help and support. Recognize the subtlest divine principle in yourself. Realize that your personal history does not belong to you. You are not your personal history. It is better to use meditation practices for this. One of such practices is the practice of connecting with the Sun Ra, published on our channel. At the end of the meditation, turn out loud to your spirit, voice your desire to serve your spirit, and trust your divine principle to manage your life. The spiritual light of the divine essence will force the predator to retreat, for darkness dissolves upon contact with light. You came to this earth not to accumulate personal history, but to fulfill your destiny. Your destiny is the path that has a heart. This is the path that Carlos Castaneda wrote about in his books. Each person is sure that he lives his life and experiences his feelings. Magic says that human consciousness is captured by a predator, which takes over control of life and energetically drains the individual. To get rid of the predator's consciousness, it is necessary to stop maintaining a personal history. Look into the inner pain and ask for help from your spirit. Freeing yourself from mundane consciousness, a person gains true freedom, which Carlos Castaneda wrote about. A free person is able to create and build for the benefit of all mankind. By creating, anyone finds the meaning of life and becomes equal to the gods who patronize man from eternity itself. This is how, rising up to the spirit and realizing one's own task on this earth, everyone gains immortality. Man looks at the world not with one's eyes, but with inner knowledge. Only the spirit fills man with knowledge. People see the world the way they look at it. The world seems gray and dull to those who look at it with dull eyes and who have lost the shine of their own eyes. Magicians know that the shine of the eyes is evidence that a person hears his spirit. It is the spirit that is able to return fire and shine to the eyes, thanks to which one can see all the splendor of the universe and begin to live in harmony with its laws. But how are the eyes connected with the spirit and how to fill the eyes with shine? Magical knowledge teaches that the eyes of a person are connected not with the world of ordinary things, but directly with the abstract or with the spirit. The eyes allow the spirit to see the physical world. In order to look at the world through the eyes of the spirit, and see all the secrets of the universe, it is necessary to restore the connection with your spirit. To do this, you need to get rid of self-pity and develop ruthlessness. Stay with us, and we will tell you how to return the shine of the eyes to yourself and learn to see the essence of all things in the world. Knowing how to see the essence of things with the help of shining eyes can make you truly happy. The ancient sages said that man is not just a physical body, but a magical being with an eternally conscious, immortal essence, which the magicians call the spirit. In the 20th century, the secret magical knowledge was again revealed to Western civilization and became public through the works of the mystical writer Carlos Castaneda. The knowledge of the magicians, which Castaneda wrote about in his books, says that a person becomes stronger and happier the more closely and comprehensively the power from the spirit of man interacts with the foundations of his everyday life. It is the ancient knowledge from the books of Carlos Castaneda that reveals the secret that the human eyes are connected not with the physical world, but with the abstract world in which the human spirit resides. At the same time, according to known facts, 50% of the brain's energy is spent on vision, and about 90% of all information about the material world comes to a person through the eyes. In other words, the spirit sees the world through the eyes of a person, and a person is able to look at the world through the eyes of the spirit. But what is the spirit we are talking about, and why is it so important to see the world through the eyes of the spirit? To answer this question, we must turn to the experience of the magicians, because the magicians know the secret of human nature. According to the secret, man has a threefold structure, which consists of the physical body, the soul, and the spirit. The body is the instrument of the spirit in the material world. The soul realizes the connection of the physical body with the spirit. Thanks to the soul, the spirit accumulates experience throughout a person's life. At the same time, the spirit itself is the source of the life-giving force and eternal consciousness, thanks to which both the body and the soul gain energy to implement the will of the spirit and come to life in the world of material and gross forms, which is physical nature. In order to try to get closer to a deep mystical understanding of the meaning of spirit and the shining eyes in human life, it is necessary to begin to learn to understand and operate with the language of the abstract, or the language of magic. Now we will introduce you to this language. Be attentive and try to see what we are saying, and do not allow stereotypes and cliches to limit your perception. In this way, you will be able to take steps towards understanding the magical truths that are an integral part of human life. Throughout life, everyone gains experience or knowledge about the world. Ancient teachings say that a person perceives and sees around him only that which is in tune with his inner knowledge. That which does not find a response in the depths of the human soul, through which knowledge is accumulated by the spirit, is hidden from a person until the human soul becomes more mature and elevated. In other words, inner knowledge through the eyes builds before each person that image of the world which he or she is able to embrace with the nobility of his or her soul impulses. The deeper a person's awareness of the experience one has lived through, and the more developed and majestic one's soul is, the more a person is able to see the world in its infinite diversity, and the brighter one's eyes shine. Magic teaches that the deepest understanding of the world is given to a person by his immortal spirit. Knowing this, the magician focuses his eyes on the abstract or on his spirit. He looks at the world with the eyes of the spirit from the height of eternity itself. That is why the eyes of the magician shine and radiate light into the world similar to the glow of the stars and galaxies. An ordinary person focuses his eyes exclusively on everyday life and the problems of everyday life. There is no knowledge of the eternal and the spirit in everyday life, which make the eyes shining. Therefore, the gaze of an ordinary person is dull and devoid of light. Dull eyes look at the world superficially and are unable to discern the beauty and splendor of the inner harmony standing behind the external objects of the world. Without contact with beauty, the eyes fade, and a person becomes exhausted and tired. Thus, forgetting about his magical nature, an ordinary person loses his magical gift that connects him with the spirit. This gift is the shine of his eyes. Now, you are probably asking yourself, what is the magical nature of man, and can you personally remember your magical nature? The secret ancient knowledge described by Carlos Castaneda will help answer this question. According to this knowledge, the soul of man is not homogeneous, but dual and consists of the tonal and the nagual. The tonal is that part of the human soul that allows everyone to live in the world of logic and intellect. This part does not notice and ignores the magical nature of things, and therefore no one is able to realize themselves as whole and live in harmony with nature, relying solely on the tonal. The nagual is the second, much more refined part of the soul of man, representing his deep inner sensory world. With the help of open and developed feelings in man, the nagual is able to interact with the abstract, and the man himself can build a connection with his spirit. It is through the nagual that the memory of one's magical nature can return to anyone. When a person perceives the world through the tonal, he is under the power of the mundane consciousness. The mundane consciousness is capable of touching only the surface of the world, ignoring its huge intangible part and immense depth. Therefore, knowledge of the tonal and the mundane consciousness make a person's gaze superficial, his eyes dull, and the image of the world the same for all people. When a person orders the tonal and develops the nagual in the process of his knowledge of the world, he reveals the true consciousness in himself. Thanks to the true consciousness, anyone is able to interact with the spirit and the invisible essence of things. The mundane and the true consciousness are always in opposition. This means that when a person looks at the world through the eyes of the tonal or with mundane eyes, he does not perceive the spirit. When the harmony of the interaction of the tonal and the nagual is developed in a person, then, thanks to the integrity of his developed soul, anyone is able to look at the world through the eyes of the spirit and perceive what is happening with the true consciousness, freeing himself from the power and tyranny of everything mundane. It is the spirit that fills a person with magical knowledge and returns the shine of one's eyes. But why does the tonal make people's eyes dull? And why do people see the world so equally through the dull gaze of the mundane consciousness? Realizing the opposition of the true and mundane consciousnesses in any living being, sorcerers teach that there is a law in the universe. If a person's consciousness is not in touch with the spirit, then it is in the power of predators who exploit the person until one is completely withered and exhausted. Predators are the principles, cliches, ossified stereotypes and attitudes of the mundane consciousness that act aggressively and predatorily on a person's perception and deprive him of the shine of his eyes. This is a tyrannical and established vision of things that strengthens the mundane consciousness in a person. Thus, instead of directing his life-giving currents and forces to build the subtlest connection with the spirit and to be a conductor of eternity in the midst of the mundane, a person strengthens the mundane in his consciousness, which ignores the eternal. Deprived of the knowledge of the eternal, the mundane inclines anyone to the spiritless. Magicians say that in this case predators devour the consciousness of a person, making it a source of energy which serves as food for predators. Thus, in the power of the mundane and under the oppression of predators, any individual withers and weakens. That is why the eyes of such a person lose their shine and light and become dull. Predators dull everyone's eyes and deprive them of their individual vision of the world, making this vision mediocre, superficial, and the same for everyone who has been possessed by predators. Thus, a person stops living by his own goals and begins to serve the goals implanted in him by predators, thereby acquiring the mundane consciousness or mind of a predator. The goals of predators are the same for everyone. There is not enough of the same things for everyone. Therefore, participating in battles with other predators for a place in the sun and for things advertised by predators, a person becomes exhausted, becomes attached to the image of himself that predators dictated to him, stops seeing the world with the shining eyes of the spirit, and loses his individuality. Individuality is given to a person by the spirit. When a person is in the spirit, he is an individual. Predators made people the same and forced them to go to the same place, wanting the same thing. Having lost his individuality, a person forgot about his spirit. This is the great tragedy that the predators have played out on humanity with dull eyes. But how exactly does the predator's mind subjugate a person? The ancient knowledge, which Carlos Castaneda wrote about, teaches that one of the most dangerous maneuvers performed by the predator's mind on a person is the feeling of self-pity, which disguises itself as a feeling of self-importance. Constantly feeling sorry for oneself, a person laments that the world is unfair to him. Denying the law of equality and equivalence, which is one of the main ones in the universe, a person seems to feel that all the troubles of the world have fallen on him and feels an imaginary negative attitude towards himself from the world. Thus, anyone becomes fixated on the image of oneself and ultimately perceives this image as isolated and separated from all of humanity and the world, being in a cocoon of self-pity. The world of a person paralyzed by self-pity narrows to an atom, in which self-pity is his tyrant and master, and which deprives a person of the shine of one's eyes. A person who is unable to give happiness to himself or to others, crushed by self-pity, looks at the world with a pitiful and dull gaze. It is interesting that in Slavic languages, the words pity and contraction are related. When a person feels sorry for himself, he contracts and stops perceiving the world in all its volume and diversity. Striving to reveal himself in the space of the universe and perceiving the diversity of nature, a person comes to the true consciousness of the spirit, gaining the shine of the eyes. Self-pity anchors a person in the world of predators and makes the person himself a predator and a tyrant. The predator is busy with survival and not with life itself in its magnificence. The predator lives to tyrannize and tyrannizes in order to live. The frightened and tired eyes of the predator are not able to peer into eternity and see the invisible greatness of the human spirit. The spirit is seen only by the shining and full of power eyes of a person who has gotten rid of the feeling of pity for his own person. To get rid of self-pity, it is necessary to develop ruthlessness. Ruthlessness does not mean cruelty, but it means refusing to live by the principles of a predator in order to gain clarity and develop sobriety of perception. Ruthlessness is getting rid of self-pity. Self-pity fences a person off from learning and knowledge. Through learning and knowledge, a person develops a nagwal and acquires the qualities of the spirit in the form of one's individuality. The spirit grants knowledge of the eternal, which sorcerers call silent knowledge. Silent knowledge is inaccessible to predators, but is available to every person in true consciousness, making the eyes shining and clear. Silent knowledge allows a person to soar above everyday life and see life from the heights of the stars and planets, from the scale of the universe. Mystical teachings say that at this moment, a person's wings of the spirit unfurl. On the wings of the spirit, everyone is able to soar and fly upward and forward from eternity to eternity through the darkness of the mundane, gazing with shining eyes into infinity. Magicians say that silent knowledge, through ruthlessness, reveals to man his unity with the universe and with nature. Through a deep sense of unity, man learns to feel the planet and the spiritual connection with it. Like man himself, our planet is a living organism and a conscious spiritual being who has a spiritual heart. Thanks to the connection of one's spiritual heart with the spiritual heart of the planet, everyone realizes his unity with all of nature and all of humanity. Feeling unity with all of humanity, man learns to think on a scale that is much larger than his own personality. Thus, the feeling of pity naturally fades and ceases to tyrannize the living, sincere heart. Through a spiritual connection with the planet, the warmth of the shine of one's eyes returns to man, thanks to one's open and sincere heart. Most likely, you do not know how to develop ruthlessness, as well as how to return the shine of your eyes and a sober, clear view of the world. To help you in this difficult task, we will share with you a magical practice for developing ruthlessness. Having developed ruthlessness, you will get rid of self-pity and the tyranny of the predator's mind. To do this, you need to begin to fill yourself with the knowledge of the eternal. Evil and predators die in eternity. In eternity lives the human spirit inaccessible to any evil and troubles of the world. Learn to feel that the earth is alive and tune into its spiritual heart. Just as you took your first steps when you were born in the physical world, relying on the earth, so you need to take your first steps on the path to awakening and spirit with the support of the spiritual heart of the earth. You need to learn to feel the unity of your spiritual heart with the spiritual heart of the earth, which magicians call Ra. The feeling of deep unity in spirit with the earth will free you from focusing on yourself as the center of the world, and will also allow you to distance yourself from the image of yourself dictated by predators and move away from self-pity. You will develop ruthlessness in yourself, get rid of the tyranny of the predator's mind and the usual dull look, restoring your energy and the shine of your eyes. Our channel has a separate video about the practice of connecting with the spiritual heart of the earth, Ra. We will leave a link to the practice in the description of the video and strongly recommend that you study and apply this practice. Learn to spread the wings of spirit and rise above the feeling of self-pity. Connection with the spiritual heart of the earth will inspire you and allow you to feel that you have the wings of the spirit. Flying on the wings of the spirit will give you a feeling of greatness and fulfillment and will lift you far above the feeling of self-pity, which tends to manifest itself in all situations of ordinary life. Learning to spread the wings of the spirit, you will stop looking at the world as a consumer and will be able to see it magically. This practice will teach you to choose what is needed, develop discrimination, and save energy, giving preference only to what is necessary, useful, and beautiful for you. Thus, you will be filled with spiritual light, spark by spark, which gives you ruthlessness, and your eyes will be filled with shine. A detailed description of the practice of unfolding the wings of the spirit, which magicians call the wings of the Arhat, is freely available at the link posted in the description of the video. Learn to reject the predator's mind. To get rid of the tyranny of the predator mind or mundane consciousness, you need to learn to reject. The energy of rejection is the energy of disagreement with the current state of affairs and refusal of the choice that the predator mind gives you. Remember, in any situation there is a choice that the predator makes in you, and there is a choice that your spirit makes. Rejection means refusing the predator, the self-pity it imposes on you, and also it means the development of ruthlessness. By rejecting the predator mind, rejecting its bright but poisonous gifts, you will naturally come into contact with the spirit and fill your eyes with force and eternity. In order to develop rejection, it is necessary to realize that a person becomes what he associates himself with. It is difficult to answer the question, "Who am I?" It is much easier to answer yourself what you are not. To understand what we are talking about, let us consider the following example together. When you see cruelty or greed in any of their manifestations, that is, states imposed on you by predators, tell yourself, "These qualities do not correspond to me. This is not me." Refuse to associate and identify yourself with these qualities of the world of predators on a deep sensory level. These are manifestations of the predator's mind, and therefore do not agree and do not accept these manipulations over you in any form. This will be the practice of rejection. Thus, removing the unnecessary and rejecting what you are not and what the predator offers you, you will learn to make the right choice with your spirit. The choice of the spirit will lead you to your destiny and return the shine of your eyes to you. Learn humility. Humility is the ability to see the meaning in everything and trust this meaning. It is the ability to perceive the one law by which the universes live in the things of the world in which people live. Humility does not mean submissively and meekly agreeing with circumstances. This is called servility and is a consequence of self-pity and a vision of the world imposed by a predator. Humility is openness and trust in one's own spirit. By developing humility, a person discovers the depth of perception in himself, feeling himself as part of a common plan. Trust in the spirit and its power bestows this power on you, endowing you with ruthlessness. With the help of the power of the spirit, you will learn to escape the tyranny of mundane consciousness and open yourself to the true consciousness. How to do it? Learn to see the deep meaning in everything and understand that you are where the Spirit has prepared you for. To do this, be honest with yourself and do not give in to despondency. Philosophers say that if it suddenly seems to you that the whole world is rolling into the abyss, be sure that this is how the universe ascends to heaven. Therefore, learn to accept things not as they seem to you, but as they really are. If you cannot be with the people and where you want, develop the beautiful and noble with those who surround you and where you are. Develop deep thinking. Come into contact with beauty and harmony in any manifestation thanks to your honest and sincere labor. Do it without pity and despondency, calmly, sincerely, and selflessly. Thus your eyes will light up with the light of your spirit. Never forget the commandment of the magicians. The heart is in the spirit, and the hands are in labor. To work with faith in the heart in the highest good, and to trust in one's own spirit is the embodiment of such a beautiful quality as humility. Humility will return to you the purity of perception and the shine of the eyes. Man is the center of greatness and power, personifying the immortality of one's higher nature. Thanks to the Spirit, man is able to see the world in its true light and perceive beauty, striving for the beautiful. The feeling of pity for one's own person humiliates the soul of man and insults one's spirit. Because of the consciousness of a predator and the feeling of pity for oneself, man becomes a constrained and too tight carrier for the consciousness of the spirit. Because of this, man's eyes grow dull and one loses one's magical gift. To get rid of pity, you need to develop ruthlessness through a spiritual connection with the earth, be able to spread the wings of the spirit, be able to reject the mind of a predator, and be able to reconcile yourself to the choice of the spirit. In this way, your eyes will fill with shine, become shining, and help you follow through the darkness of everyday life, the path of truth towards your destiny. Awareness is the most important gift of the Force. If you cannot be aware, you are not a magician and you will never become one. Do we really control our lives? Absolutely not. We do not know our invisible higher nature. Can we master our deep hidden potential? Without a doubt. But how, you ask? Through the practice of awareness or magical attention. The magician and warrior of the spirit, who became the most mystical writer of the 20th century, Carlos Castaneda, was the first to tell about magical attention. At one of his closed seminars at Yale University, Carlos Castaneda revealed one of the most significant secrets of magic for a limited circle, the practice of awareness. Without the practice of awareness, no person is able to touch the real secret knowledge and develop one's inner hidden power, capable of revealing one's purpose to a person. When performed correctly, the practice of magical attention allows one to interact with the force and feel the energy currents of the world. The practice of magical attention consists of 3 stages: attention to one's own state, awareness of action, and awareness of listening. But first of all, before beginning to study the practice of awareness, it is necessary to feel and see the difference between realization and awareness. Speaking to the audience, Castaneda explained that realization is a complete act tied to a specific situation. awareness is a state that concerns all situations at once and lasts continuously and constantly throughout human life. The first stage of awareness is attention to your state. Performing this stage of the magical attention practice requires close attention to your physical, emotional, and mental states at the current moment in time. It is necessary to clearly feel and describe how you feel, and most importantly, what you feel at the level of the body, emotions, and thoughts. Listen to any minor detail in all three states and track even the slightest change. To do this, sit comfortably, relax, close your eyes, and begin to breathe deeply using the diaphragm. Try to let go of the flow of thoughts and stop controlling it. Just observe and record your physical, emotional, and mental states. Performing this stage of the awareness practice requires utmost sincerity and honesty with yourself. At the same time, during the first stage of the practice of magical attention, you may feel sharp emotional fluctuations and pronounced sensations on any of the three levels. In this case, the practice should be stopped immediately. This means that either your power has come too close to you, or you are deceiving yourself and your sensations are ordinary hallucinations. In the first case, your condition is dangerous, since you need to learn to interact with the power, showing calmness, patience, and humility. You may not be ready for this. In the second case, you waste your internal magical potential in vain and lose energy that you could use to reveal your magical gift. In fact, during the first stage of the practice, you should not feel anything unusual or atypical for you at the level of your body, emotions, and thoughts. Any emotional fluctuation and tension are stress for your higher nervous system, which forces your body to physically spend additional energy potential to restore balance and return to a stable and steady state. At the same time, you need to understand that the amount of energy that you spend on the physical level in your everyday life and the energy reserve you need for spiritual development are the same energy potential that you acquired with your birth. In other words, if in your everyday life you live harmoniously with nature and with yourself, treat your physical body wisely and with care, putting your life in order and responsibly fulfilling your obligations, then the amount of energy spent on maintaining a healthy and efficient state of your body and mind becomes significantly less than in the case of a disorderly attitude to your own life and your own body. This means that in this case, you will be able to use much more energy in the process of your spiritual evolution and in revealing your true magical nature and your higher self. In general, you need to learn to spend energy only on what is absolutely necessary for you. This is achieved through a healthy physical body, restrained and stable emotional behavior, and a sober and clear thought process. A great example of this approach to life and the appropriate use of energy is a Taoist monk. By refusing to waste energy at the level of the body, emotions, and thoughts, Taoist monks maintain excellent health even in old age. The cornerstone of the philosophy of restraint and refusal to waste energy is not the development of additional physical or spiritual capabilities, but the preservation and conservation of the energy available to you and the cessation of interaction with everything that is an obstacle and barrier on your path to the development of sensitivity and interaction with the force and with your higher true self. Emotional outbursts and vivid sensations during the first stage of the practice of magical attention are an indicator of unpreparedness for the entire practice. The practice of magical attention, revealed by Carlos Castaneda at a closed seminar, must be started together with the practice of putting your life in order. Having organized and built your own life in accordance with your magical power, you will be able to accumulate the free energy you need to realize your destiny. The practice of bringing life into order is based on three fundamental laws: the law of body order, the law of thought order, and the law of three magical affirmations. The law of body order is based on understanding the correct principles of nutrition and the rejection of any food poisons, such as sugar, nicotine, alcohol, and other narcotic substances. At the same time, the law of body order presupposes the cultivation of interest and deep sympathy for physical culture and an active lifestyle. The law of order of thoughts implies the desire for education, high morality and culture, development of critical thinking to incoming ideas and information and to one's own environment. Do not interact with those ideas and people that clutter, exhaust and oppress you, exhausting you physically and emotionally. Interact only with those ideas and people that inspire you and motivate you to develop, evolve and create. There are 3 magical affirmations that can be used to control your internal and external state, namely, I am not there where I must be, I am not doing what I must do, and I am indulging in vice. If at least one of the 3 affirmations is true at this moment and under these circumstances, then the practitioner is advised to reconsider their attitude to the correct use of their internal energy resource. For those of you who have firmly decided to change your destiny for the better and put your own life in order, we will leave a link to the practice of putting your life in order from our research team in the description of the video. People do not know how to lose. When they see that they cannot win, they always surrender. What people call a vice or a bad habit is nothing more than surrender. Surrender without a fight is a fall into the mud. The second stage of the practice of magical attention is awareness of action and is connected with one of the key magical concepts that was revealed by Carlos Castaneda during a closed seminar. We are talking about alertness. Alertness is being in the highest state of attention. Attention, according to sorcerers, is not a quality of the mind, but of the physical body. Alertness allows the sorcerer to instantly react to the changing world and redistribute efforts and energy in the most effective way. Alertness is bringing the body into an active state, emotions into a stable and balanced state, and thoughts into a state of complete clarity and depth. Alertness does not mean tension. Imagine a tiger. The tiger is always attentive and vigilant. At any moment, the tiger is ready to jump and deliver a lightning-fast and decisive blow. It expends energy and effort only at the moment of the jump and at the moment of the blow. The rest of the time, the tiger's body is relaxed. The movements are light and not tense. Alertness is essentially total attention to the things of the world. In alertness, a person sees with clarity and precision that all things in the world are connected. With this vision comes the ability to compare. When a person knows how to compare, one influences the course of events and therefore wins the battle for one's own freedom. The essence of awareness of action is the necessary state with which any action in the life of a magician is performed. Carlos Castaneda revealed to his readers the secret that any human action is a magical act that must be performed in the necessary state of awareness. The necessary state of awareness affects the level of the body, emotions and thoughts. The physical state is alertness and readiness for action. The emotional state is a feeling of total calm mixed with quiet and deep joy. The mental state is a state of open flow when the thought is extracted from the depths of memory without any effort. It is necessary to say a few words about quiet and deep joy. Joy is a magical state which, according to the teachings of sorcerers, which Castaneda wrote about in his books, is different from the state of emotional ecstasy and infantilism, and indicates that the sorcerer follows the path that has a heart. Carlos Castaneda's teacher, Don Juan, said that every person is surrounded by a million paths that will lead oneself to nowhere, and there's only one path that has a heart. It is this path that is the purpose of man and is capable of leading oneself to the full disclosure of one's magical potential. Where does quiet and calm joy come from? There are ancient teachings that say that our earth is not a physical shell on which nature develops, but a manifestation of the spiritual nature of a mighty conscious being whose physical shell is the planet on which we live. In other words, the earth is a spiritual living being that goes through the stages of evolution together with people. The earth, like any person, has a spirit or divine origin. The ancients called this spirit Ra and conventionally believed that it was in the center of the earth. In the Slavic family of languages, there is a word radost, which means joy and can be broken down into 2 words, Ra and dost. Ra means light and warmth from the spiritual sun of the earth Ra. Dost means abundance. Thus, the meaning of the word Radost can be revealed as the abundance of light and warmth in a person's life due to one's subtle and close connection with the spiritual heart of the earth. Before his departure, Don Juan revealed to Castaneda the main secret of a warrior, which was that a warrior must love the earth and be in close interaction with it, because it is the earth that is capable of giving a warrior a colossal magical boost that can help a person choose the path that has a heart. The spiritual heart of the earth, Ra, is a source of deep and quiet joy. To experience joy, you need to learn to connect with the spiritual heart of the earth. The feeling of quiet and deep joy means that a person has enough pure spiritual light in one's own spiritual heart, flowing from the spiritual heart of the earth. The feeling of quiet and deep joy is the only tuning fork that indicates that you are doing everything right and moving along the path of your destiny. We invite you to begin to open your spiritual heart and learn to connect it with the spiritual heart of the earth in order to accumulate joy within yourself. For this, we will leave a link to the practice Connection with the Heart of Ra in the description of the video, which we ourselves use in our spiritual searches. We can listen, but we are always afraid to hear. To hear means to plunge into reality. The third stage of the practice of magical attention is the awareness of listening. At his closed seminar, Carlos Castaneda revealed a magical fact. An ordinary person does not know how to listen, but always hears superficially. The reason for superficial listening and superficial attention to what an ordinary person hears from another person is fear. The teaching of the sorcerers, to which Castaneda belonged, says that a person is a magical being who is in constant communication with the immortal, conscious, and eternally comprehending essence, which the sorcerers called spirit. Every person has a spirit. At the same time, the magical teaching reveals the secret of the fact that direct interaction with the spirit in a person is blocked by the tonal. The tonal is the part of the human consciousness that is responsible for the perception of the surrounding world within the framework of ordinary, everyday life. The source of fear is the tonal, which protects its boundaries and does not allow a person to hear and perceive in the story of another person the power of the spirit, which the sorcerers called reality. By interacting with reality, a person develops another part of consciousness in oneself, which is capable of perceiving the hidden and unmanifested magical nature, and which sorcerers call the negual. The tonal blocks the negual and therefore makes a person feel fear and listen superficially and inattentively. This means to listen and not to hear reality. True listening is contact with the nagual. The mere possibility of this terrifies the tonal. Another reason why a person does not hear is pain. An ordinary person, as understood by magicians, has lost one's connection with the spirit. Without a deep connection with the spirit, the tonal of such a person becomes a tyrant in one's life and forces a person to acquire the consciousness of a predator, which tyrannizes other people and all of nature. The predator is blind and cruel, aggressive and uncontrollable. Most importantly, the consciousness of a predator is a source of pain both in a person's life and in the lives of those around oneself. Awareness of listening allows you to hear someone else's pain and feel your own pain. Awareness of listening reveals to a person the inferiority of the consciousness of a predator and frees oneself from the tyranny of the tonal, taking a person out from under its power. If you want us to cover the topic of the consciousness of a predator in more detail and tell you how to get rid of this parasitic principle in the consciousness, write to us about it in the comments. Awareness of listening allows one to approach a deep understanding of empathy. Empathy leads to the awareness of someone else's pain as one's own. Everyone is in pain. Pain is the same for everyone. There is no such thing as someone else's pain. The tonal replaced the concept of empathy with the concept of compassion. Empathy is the use of one's feelings and the activation of the nagual in order to get rid of the source of pain. Compassion is a theological concept that is based on a sense of self-importance and a feeling of pity for one's own person. Compassion sounds like I am helping you because I expect that in a similar situation you will help me. This is what the consciousness of a predator says. Empathy can be recognized as, I feel your pain as my own. I will help you get rid of the pain so that there will be less pain in the world. This is what my spirit tells me. Compassion is a category of the tonal. Empathy is a category of the nagual that leads to a deep awareness of unity with the energy flows of the world and with the entire human family. Awareness of listening will reveal feelings and the nagual in you, thanks to which the connection with your spirit will become conscious and stable. The spirit will show you and lead you to the path that has a heart, at the end of which your destiny will meet you. An indicator of whether you are able to practice awareness of listening is inspiration and awareness of the need for creation and creativity for the benefit of all humanity. The practice of magical attention is an accessible technique for increasing attention in life and revealing internal hidden reserves. The practice of awareness is a consistent practice consisting of attention to one's own state, awareness of action, and awareness of listening. Magical attention will reveal your magical potential and lead you to your own destiny. The practice of awareness is the golden key to understanding our true essence, left to us as a legacy from the wise ones of this world. A definition of sorcery is the ability to perceive more than the average human being, whose perception of the universe is limited. Surely, when you hear the word sorcery, you imagine a character in a leather cloak, with long black hair, muttering something under their breath and shocking others with their, to put it mildly, strange words and actions. This is exactly how the entertainment industry has distorted the concept of sorcery in people's minds. But what is the truth? Let's talk about it. Since the most ancient times, a certain secret knowledge has existed across the earth, passed down from master to disciple and hidden from ordinary, uninitiated people. This knowledge was not perceived by the masses, who believed that life was nothing more than a monotonous gray sequence of days, and that the world was a hostile structure where one had to fight for a place under the sun. Seeing this state of affairs, the keepers of the secret knowledge concealed it from ordinary people, for the mysteries accessible to anyone possessing this knowledge could harm those who were not ready to accept them and reconsider their perception of reality. This knowledge was sorcery. However, sorcery is not something that looms as a frightening anomaly in human life. Rather, it is profound knowledge about the world and the human being itself, without which one cannot live a truly full and illusion-free life. And here's why. Let's take a few moments to symbolically imagine sorcery as a triangle. There are three types of sorcery: black sorcery, white sorcery, and higher or transcendental sorcery. Black sorcery is aimed at satisfying and indulging the weaknesses of the body and the animalistic soul of a person, turning them into a slave to their base inclinations. This includes various rituals for attracting money, sexual relationships, material success, fortune-telling, in other words, everything that binds consciousness to a mundane and mercantile perception of the world. Black sorcery is the path of a parasite, selfishly exploiting the forces of nature. It is a road of suffering, pain, and depletion. White sorcery unveils the higher or divine soul within a person and teaches everyone to live in harmony with nature, to feel and share warmth with one another. Among other things, it manifests in the form of healing through medicinal herbs and restoring health by harnessing the forces of nature. And finally, transcendental sorcery allows a person to establish a connection with their spirit, hear their higher self, and restore the seeker's memory of their eternal divine origin. It is higher sorcery that serves as the path for every individual to their true destiny. Of course, when working with new ideas, it is necessary to interact with those for whom such ideas have become part of their lives, but such people may not be around. By the way, for this purpose, we created the Three Suns Closed Club, in which, together with the participants, we touch upon the unknown sides of both the spiritual nature of man and the unsolved mysteries of the world and the cosmos. It is the Three Suns Closed Club that helps to find like-minded people and begin to perceive the world better, clearer, and deeper. In the Closed Club, we publish all necessary information, links to films, books, scientific articles, etc. that will help you to get personal enlightenment. In case you want to join us in the Three Suns Closed Club and learn to perceive new ideas and begin to develop magical thinking that will enrich your life, we will leave a link in the description of the video. Notice that in the symbolic triangle, the third vertex, corresponding to higher sorcery, is positioned above the plane where the other two vertices, forming its base, reside. Symbolically, this means that transcendental sorcery elevates a person beyond the realm of purely material pursuits, subordinating their animalistic inclinations to the higher principle and deifying the human soul. Thus, sorcery allows one to perceive ordinary life from the heights of the divine, immortal principle within, and at the same time, maintain a connection with external reality, manifesting this principle in the visible world. Transcendental sorcery is an expression of ordered rationality, clarity, sobriety, and the ability to strategically comprehend one's own life. From this point on, when we refer to sorcery, we will specifically mean transcendental sorcery. Sorcery reveals to the sincere seeking heart the knowledge that a sorcerer is none other than the human being itself, whose nature from birth is not only conditioned by physical perception of the world, but is also deeply intertwined with the movement of the celestial lights, the stars, and the universe. The sorcerer's essence within a person teaches them to be a brother or sister to the entire world and grants a life aligned with the same laws that govern the earth and the vast cosmos. The tragedy, however, lies in the fact that a person forgets their sorcerous origin because throughout life they ignore the unseen part of their being, one that inseparably connects them to the center of creation and allows their heart to beat in harmony with the pulse of the spiritual evolution of all existence. The wise saw in this forgetfulness the true reason why a man became unhappy and lonely. Only sorcery can restore the memory of one's divine origin and lead a person back to a life of true happiness. Sorcery is the path of inner transformation, a profound perception of everyday life and the only true means of altering reality. If the world of forms is the realm of intellect and logic, then sorcery is an all-encompassing domain, one that includes logic and intellect, yet resonates with the subtlest vibrations of the human soul. Sorcery allows one to peer beyond the gray, dusty veil of the ordinary and witness an inexplicable yet majestic vision of the world, painted by creation itself and hidden behind that veil. It is the ability to see more, perceive more finely, and live a life far more elevated than one consumed by mere survival and routine. Put simply, anyone who seeks to move beyond conventional perceptions of the world and is driven to explore their own inner, hidden essence can confidently consider themselves a sorcerer in the making. The wise have always known that only by awakening their sorcerous nature can a person remember their true purpose, unlock their power, and live the life worthy of the gods themselves. So, let's summarize. What does it mean to practice sorcery? To practice sorcery means to break free from stereotypical perceptions of reality, to carefully and gently transcend the power of social limitations imposed by tradition and culture. Sorcery teaches one not to indulge in personal weaknesses. It directly touches the soul and awakens the spirit within, ennobling the former and strengthening the latter. It is sorcery that enables a person to take full control of their life and find a way out of even the most seemingly impossible situations. And most importantly, to practice sorcery means to serve the well-being of the world and all of humanity. After all, sorcery is not just a part of life, it is life itself in all its infinite diversity and magnificence. And now, friends, write us in comments, does this description resemble the stereotypical portrayal of sorcery created by television and the internet? It is essential to realize that in order to truly connect with sorcery, one must learn to see and think sorcerously, embracing sorcerous ideas as the foundation of life. By perceiving these ideas and learning to think beyond stereotypes, cliches, and superstitions, basing on their own spirit, a person becomes impervious to the entrenched social programs that reduce their existence from the grandeur of the universe to the level of an ordinary taxpayer and consumer. Here are 3 sorcerous ideas that we recommend you realize and reconsider first. The first sorcerous idea: a human being is not just a physical body, but a complex, threefold structure composed of spirit, soul, and body. Spirit is an ineffable, immortal essence that exists within eternity itself, and through the feeling and perceiving soul, animates the human body. The life you possess is not lived by your body, it is experienced and expressed by your higher self, your spirit. This means that your personal, family, and social life are merely earthly reflections of a vast cosmic life, one that makes you equal to constellations, suns, and galaxies, and that is an inseparable part of the great and beautiful symphony, played by evolution in the divine halls of creation. And now, do you feel the true scale of your existence? In other words, the more elevated the sorcerous ideas a person embraces, the greater the events that unfold in their life, and the more deeply and profoundly they unlock their sorcerous potential and true destiny. Conversely, the more one rejects sorcerous knowledge, the more grounded and controlled by circumstances they become. As a result, they understand less and less about what is truly happening in their life. And here you could ask, why then does almost everyone ignore their sorcerous nature? This brings us to the second sorcerous idea. Human consciousness is dual. One part of consciousness is trapped under a destructive influence, preventing people from seeing beyond the surface and understanding the true essence of events. This part is called mundane consciousness, or the predator's consciousness. The second part frees a person from this influence. This is true consciousness, or the consciousness of spirit. The predator's consciousness makes people feel like victims of circumstances and fills them with self-pity. Deeply concealing this self-pity from others and even from themselves, people mask this destructive feeling under an inflated sense of self-importance. In reality, the more important a person feels, the more pathetic they perceive themselves to be, and the more they secretly pity themselves. The predator hides a person's sorcerous nature from them. The consciousness of spirit, however, grants sorcerous perception and allows one to live with full awareness. This means that anyone can break free from the predator's grip and build their life according to the laws of creation, thus arranging it in the best possible way. At this point, you might ask one more logical question. Is it possible to completely rid oneself of the predator's consciousness to be fully in spirit? The answer is no, not completely. But don't rush to despair. It might sound strange, but the predator's consciousness is actually a part of the sorcerous nature of a person born on this planet. This consciousness will accompany anyone who lives until their death. The mundane consciousness, so to speak, is the dark side of the magical nature. However, despite this, the influence of the predator's consciousness on life can be significantly reduced by making a choice toward responsibility and spirit. Sorcerers say that one should not fight evil, but rather develop virtue. In other words, make true consciousness the dominant force in your life. When you do this, the predator will retract its claws, withdraw its fangs from the heart of your life, and retreat to its distant, dark den. One that spirit will permanently seal with the philosopher's stone, which is your noble, divine soul. The third sorcerer's idea states, to defeat the predator, one must be a peaceful warrior. A peaceful warrior wages war against their own stupidity and for freedom from the imprisonment of the predator's consciousness. This is the only war worthy of a person as a magical being. Stupidity is not intellectual underdevelopment. but the total disregard for one's sorcerous nature. Stupidity is submitting to the predator's consciousness. From this, we can deduce that a person gains true reason and wisdom only when they awaken the consciousness of spirit within themselves and entrust their higher self with the management of their life. Stupidity cultivates self-pity and blocks attention to internal magical changes. These inner changes inevitably lead to external transformations. Hence, a person's external life embodies their internal state. A peaceful warrior understands that by conquering and eliminating stupidity within themselves, they will ease the burden of all humanity. They will be able to express their magical nature for the good of all. The inability to think in terms of the greater good of humanity and the unwillingness to work toward that good is a manifestation of the predator's consciousness. It is also one of the many forms of stupidity and the atrophy of the higher aspirations of the soul. A person strong in spirit is inseparably connected to all and to each. To think or feel otherwise is foolish and unworthy of someone who has awakened their magical nature. For the sorcerer, it is clear that changes in personal, familial, and social spheres are rooted in the same laws that govern internal transformation. Both on the individual level and on the level of a state, true change and evolution can only occur through the implementation of magical ideas and a philosophical, mystical perception of reality. This, in more concrete terms, means developing noble and highest moral principles within oneself, recognizing one's responsibility towards society and humanity, and rejecting and distancing oneself from stupidity and base animal impulses fueled by the predator's consciousness. A good person, just like a good state, can only be built by the force of the highest principle, which reveals itself in each individual through noble, moral, and rational ideas that are embraced as the foundation of life. The transmutation of the soul from the base consciousness of the predator to the consciousness of the divine soul, aligned with its higher nature, is the essence of transcendental sorcery. Sorcery brings peace into a person's life and makes human life a magical piece of the world. Sorcery is the path of the peaceful warrior. The peaceful warrior fights against their own stupidity, for themselves, for all people, for their state on earth, and for the heavenly state from which the peaceful warrior came to earth and which people have come to call the universe. We have all not only heard of tyrants but have also encountered true tyrants in our lives. Many believe that a tyrant is an embodiment of evil, bringing pain, fear, and suffering into one's existence. All of this is undoubtedly true, but only for the ordinary man, not for the sorcerer. Strangely enough, when engaging in battle with a tyrant, the sorcerer does not feel fear or hatred, but rather enjoyment and happiness. You may say, this is fiction. We say, this is a fact, verified countless times. Stay with us and make yourselves comfortable. In just a few moments, this fact will become part of your own life as well. The mistake average men make in confronting petty tyrants is not to have a strategy to fall back on. Warriors, on the other hand, not only have a well thought out strategy, but are free from self-importance. It may seem strange to you, but tyranny is one of the most common forms of interaction between people. Manipulation, aggression, anger, insults, coercion, all of these are merely fragments of the tyranny that human beings encounter. The behavioral model of the tyrant did not become widespread only in modern times, when it seems that the world has been blinded by hatred, lawlessness, and malice. No, it took root long ago, far before our age. One of the most striking examples in the long lineage of tyrants is the conquistadors, those who seized Mesoamerica and turned its captured inhabitants into slaves. But in that distant time of the conquistador tyrants, something occurred that radically changed the lives of not only those born in the centuries that followed, but also ours. We who live in the 21st century still feel its positive influence. Many indigenous people faced with the tyranny of the invaders, quickly realize that tyrants brought fear and aggression into their lives, turning them into victims. Those who merely tried to flee and hide often ended up as powerless slaves or were simply wiped out. Clearly, such a course of action offered little chance of survival, let alone freedom. Yet among the many, a few began to ask themselves questions like, could it be that the stance of a victim is a mistake? Is it possible, these few wondered, that with tyranny comes not just suffering, but also a hidden opportunity, perhaps even fortune? Such thoughts may seem absurd, even reckless, may not they? But let's not rush to conclusions, my friends. Let us reveal a secret to you. These few indigenous people were called sorcerers. Enduring an unbearable and arduous life side by side with formidable tyrants, the sorcerers developed a unique perception of reality, one that differed greatly from the way ordinary people, both indigenous and otherwise, saw the world. The sorcerers came to a striking conclusion. Encountering a tyrant in one's life was a gift of fate, and rather than resisting with fear or suffering, one should experience enjoyment, even happiness, in facing such an adversary. But it was not because sorcerers sought out suffering, quite the opposite. These rare individuals did not suffer at all in the presence of tyrants, for they possessed a certain hidden knowledge, passed down through generations. This is why they called themselves men of knowledge. At this point in our tale, my friends, be mindful of your judgments and cautious with your imagination. The sorcerers we speak of have nothing in common with the ridiculous notions of magic and magicians spread by the media and dubious television shows. A sorcerer is not a mere illusionist, but a being with a vastly broader and deeper perception of reality than the ordinary person, who remains confined by the concerns of everyday life. This extraordinary perception is made possible by an abundance of energy, a reservoir of power far greater than that of the average man. Remember this well, friends, for we shall return to it soon. One of those who openly wrote about the men of knowledge and their way of thinking was Carlos Castaneda. The best-selling author of books on the magical traditions of the Toltec's indigenous people began his journey as an inexperienced writer, only to later become one of the men of knowledge himself, thanks to his teacher, Don Juan. According to Castaneda, the knowledge of sorcerers can help anyone develop a strategy and triumph over any tyrant. Unlike the ordinary person, who typically has no strategy at all and succumbs to despair, fear, and ultimately victimhood, the sorcerer follows a precise and effective strategy, one that ensures victory over the tyrant. Do not worry if you still do not fully understand what strategy we are referring to, or at what point in the battle with the tyrant one should feel enjoyment and happiness. We will introduce you to the strategy for overcoming a tyrant in just a few minutes. First, however, it is essential to set aside skepticism and disbelief and attempt to see the world through the eyes of the men of knowledge, or, to put it another way, to see the world magically. The men of knowledge are certain that a true and complete victory over a tyrant cannot be achieved from the ordinary level of perception, but only from a magical one. Therefore, in the struggle against a tyrant, it is absolutely necessary to perceive what is happening magically. They prove that even the worst tyrants can bring delight, provided of course that one is a warrior. To develop magical vision, one must take 2 steps toward magic. The first step is to accept 2 magical truths which serve as the foundation for every man of knowledge when facing a tyrant. Magical truth number 1: an ordinary person does not lose to a tyrant because the tyrant exhausts them, but because they enter the battle already exhausted. Magical truth number 2: the ultimate goal of interacting with a tyrant is not to defeat the tyrant per se, but to defeat one's sense of self-importance. A sorcerer uses the tyrant to battle their own self-importance, whereas an ordinary person fights the tyrant and in doing so loses to their own self-importance. These two magical truths reveal that the source of human suffering and failure in the face of tyranny does not lie in the external world, but in the inner state of the individual. From the very beginning of conscious life, a person nurtures a sense of self-importance, unknowingly depleting almost all of their energy in maintaining it, leaving too little for what is truly necessary to survive and thrive. Self-importance is a deeply embedded mechanism of self-exhaustion and a dangerous form of internal manipulation. Recognizing it within oneself is one of the most difficult challenges any individual can face. The sorcerer's logic, however, is simple and pragmatic. They came to a profound conclusion. To restore energy, one must first rid themselves of self-importance. This is why the men of knowledge, upon encountering a tyrant, see them as an opportunity, a stroke of fortune that will expose the hidden imperfections within their being. And this is precisely why the men of knowledge feel enjoyment and happiness whenever they meet a tyrant on this earth. The second step toward magic is to embrace the magical strategy for overcoming tyrants. However, in order to use this strategy effectively, it is essential to understand how magic divides and classifies tyrants. Magical knowledge teaches that there is the tyrant, the true ruler of the universe, and the primary source of energy, against which all earthly tyrants are mere pathetic imitations. This tyrant takes away human consciousness after death. Earthly tyrants or petty tyrants are divided into two categories: little petty tyrants and small fry petty tyrants, or teensy-weensy petty tyrants. Little petty tyrants can pursue a person and drive them into poverty. This category is further subdivided into 4 subtypes. The first type torments the person through cruelty and violence. The second type creates an unbearable atmosphere of uncertainty and constant fear through cunning. The third type presses on the person's sense of pity and terrorizes them through their own suffering. The fourth type drives the person to sheer rage. Small fry petty tyrants, on the other hand, constantly irritate and annoy the person with their actions and behavior. Write in the comments, friends, what type of tyrants you have encountered in your own life. Without self-importance, we are invulnerable. So, the magical strategy for overcoming a petty tyrant and the sense of self-importance consists of 5 elements, known as the attributes of the life of a man of knowledge. These are control, discipline, endurance, timing, and will. Men of knowledge say that the most challenging attribute to master is will, as it belongs to the realm of the unknown or the Nagual. The other 4 attributes belong to the realm of the known, the tonal, and are therefore more comprehensible to an ordinary person. That is why, to defeat a tyrant, the first attributes to be engaged are control, endurance, discipline, and timing. Now, we will briefly but concisely reveal the essence of these attributes. If you want us to convey the meaning of each aspect of this strategy in the deepest and most accessible way, let us know in the comments. We will create a separate video for each magical attribute. The first magical attribute, control. Control is the ability to temper your spirit when you are being trampled and oppressed. Sorcerers believe that the source of a person's power is a self-aware, immortal structure that breathes life into them and represents their true or higher self. They call this structure the spirit. Think back. What were the strongest emotions you experienced during prolonged interactions with a tyrant? Here's a hint. Most likely they were feelings of despair, oppression, loneliness, and even betrayal. Connecting with the spirit frees you from these feelings. To temper your spirit means to feel the support of the spirit, to sense the power of your higher self. Men of knowledge say that the spirit support in the form of power is always present in a person's life, regardless of circumstances, even under tyranny. When facing a tyrant, try to stop your habitual perception of the situation and feel that the spirit has not abandoned you to fate, that you are not alone. Power is always with you, wherever you are and whatever happens to you. No matter how difficult it gets, you must shift your focus away from external weakness and toward inner power by sensing the support of the Spirit, which is always present. Doing this in moments of oppression and hardship is what it means to develop control. To help you cultivate control and strengthen your connection with the Spirit, we have made a special practice available in our Three Sons community. The link to it will be provided in the video description. The next magical attribute, discipline. Discipline is the ability to learn and gather the necessary information while being constantly under pressure. To defeat a tyrant, one must engage in continuous learning. First and foremost, it is essential to learn to see and perceive the situation from a magical perspective, gradually moving away from the habitual perception of being a victim. Remember, a situation cannot be resolved using the same worldview that caused it in the first place. Pause the video for a few moments and reflect on this. The deeper your perception of the world, the better you recognize the connections between things and the more control you have over any scenario unfolding in your life. To learn to see the world in a new way while being under pressure, this is discipline. The petty tyrant arrives bearing gifts, though unaware of them. The greatest gift a tyrant gives a person is the challenge to rid themselves of self-importance and to renew their sense of wonder about the world. The third attribute of a sorcerer's life that enables them to overcome a tyrant is forbearance. Forbearance means having the patience and calmness to wait for what must come to pass. However, forbearance is not a lack of will or submissive obedience. By practicing discipline and control, a person of knowledge accumulates the energy of trust, flowing from the Spirit. Through this trust, you will come to feel that the Spirit always accompanies you and teaches you a great magical truth. What is meant to come will inevitably find the one who deserves it. This means that in your confrontation with a tyrant through magical strategy, power will enter your life. The tyrant, blinded by their own grandeur, has already fallen into a trap from which there is no escape. Everyone receives exactly what they strive for. To see and accept this truth is the essence of forbearance. The fourth attribute of a man of knowledge is timing. At its core, the timing is the ability to precisely determine the moment when necessary action must be taken, when the situation can unfold due to your decisiveness and confidence in success. This means that when engaging with a tyrant, you must be filled with the understanding that everything has its time. There is a time for waiting and a time for precise, resolute action. Timing is the ability to see that everything moves in accordance with the laws of nature. You must embrace faith in change and release both the feeling of despair and the illusion of permanence. Everything moves, shifts, and eventually passes, including your struggle with the tyrant. This knowledge will set you free. The ability to wait when necessary and to act when the moment demands it, that is the essence of timing. A tyrant is always a magical challenge. People are conditioned to perceive this challenge as a threat. When facing a threat, a person is already weakened by their sense of self-importance. This is precisely why they lose the battle for their own freedom against a petty tyrant. But the magical truth teaches us that in reality the tyrant is part of a precise and effective strategy, one that allows a person to permanently rid themselves of the only true tyrant that has pursued them all their life, no matter where they are. This true tyrant is the sense of self-importance. By using the strategy for overcoming the tyrant, sorcerers experience enjoyment and happiness, for they see in their life a chance to break free from self-importance. We invite you to apply this strategy, which is now open to you. Do not fight the tyrant, fight your sense of self-importance. Defeat it once and for all. In doing so, you will gain true freedom and become untouchable to any tyrant in this world or any other.